Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we continue ANDOR April, baby.
That's right. That's right.
For this installment of ANDOR April, we are talking about none other than the latest and greatest from Alexander Freed, Star Wars, Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear. It's the first of a trilogy that will be continued by Rebecca Roanhorse and Fran Wilde. Not an Andor tie-in, but we're talking about it as part of ANDOR April because it is like Andor is the meal. This is like the soup side salad.
Yes. Soup, salad, unlimited breadsticks. That's what this book is.
Right. You know, if there's soup side salad, Rebecca, Fran, Alexander, maybe at the end of the trilogy, we should figure out who's the soup, who's the salad,
and who's the breadsticks,
who's the side.
The breadsticks.
All of equal value, but like we should put that in food terms.
Okay.
Note that one for 2 years from now.
We'll pencil that down so we don't forget it.
Really important content in the opening minute here.
Yeah. Here's the thing. When we were putting together Andor April, we were like, yeah, this obviously goes in Andor April. And then now, as we're about to talk about it, I feel the need to justify it. Like, no, this isn't Andor explicitly, but this is so Andor. It's so Andor that it has to go in Andor April because it's so Andor. It's got the tie-ins. It's got the time period. It's got the level of density and texture that Andor has. So that's why it's got to be here. That's why we're talking about it. And if you have other thoughts, go. Don't listen then. We make the rules here. We make the rules on Andor April. So I'm really excited to finally be talking about this book with you because it's also been out for a little while already. And also talking about it now as we are in the season of Andor and as we're like really back into this show. And you could say we've never been more back. As we gear up for season 2, I feel like I've never been more back than I have in this moment. So I'm excited to think about it, having just rewatched Andor season 1 and really thinking about where we're headed in the galaxy towards Rogue One. With season 2, like I'm just really excited to think about this book with that lens in the focus.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, season 2 drops in exactly two weeks and 1 day.
Wow.
We got Celebration next week. We are leaving for Japan this week. It's a wild and crazy time here in Star Wars land, but we're so excited. We're so excited for season 2. So we hope you are also as excited as us, and stick around for this episode because it will be a full spoiler breakdown. Spoiler alert: there is an empire. There is an empire, and it is reigning.
You really didn't give any potential for the person to pause before you said it's there's empire. You just kind of jumped in there. Anyway. When the book came out back in April, now is April, back in February, we did put out an interview with Alexander Freed about this book. So if you haven't listened to that, we definitely recommend it because he gives some insights and we absolutely adore chatting with him. So make sure to check that interview out. We'll link it in our episode notes, but also you can find it on the feed.
But before we truly get started, Sarah, as in typical book discussion fashion, which by the way, if you're a new listener, we do these all the time. You're coming in at the tail end of like our High Republic peak book discussion era, because we only got 3 of those left, which is
don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't talk to me. I'm crying. I'm sobbing my eyes out.
But we love reading. We love reading. So if you haven't listened to one of our episodes yet, you're gonna be in for a time. And then again, we got 2 more of these in the future with this trilogy. But every book episode, we do a independent bookstore of the week, highlight somewhere in the local community, in your neck of the woods, our neck of the woods, somewhere in the world. So Sarah, kick us off with our bookstore that we're featuring.
I am thrilled to introduce you to Bone Shaker Books, a radical bookstore out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They are a volunteer-run bookstore in the Seward neighborhood of Minneapolis. They aim to introduce readers to leftist politics, facilitate conversations, support ongoing movements, and collectively create a space that will grow, evolve, and respond to community needs and pressing issues. They are open 7 days a week, and they do require masks if you are in the local area, but they've got some if you're wanting to go in. And they also sell books online via Bookshop if you would like to support them online. They are at boneshakerbooks.com, and they also, one, seem like they're in a really interesting old building. Two, have some great lists of books, recommendations, and bestsellers on their bookshop, including various topics, whether it be justice for Palestine, Indigenous studies and decolonization, science, environment, activism, prison abolition, etc., etc., etc. They have tons of lists with a lot of incredible resources that I really would like to dig into. Some of these topics I haven't read as thoroughly as others, so I'm really excited that they have put these resources together. So not only can you see them, but you can also purchase them. So I wanted to highlight them, especially as we are talking about ANDOR April, and the rise of fascism, but also the rise of rebellion and resistance to fascism. I feel like this is an important moment and an important bookstore to highlight. So if you are in the Minneapolis area, check them out. And if you are not, check out their bookshop.org, their site, which you can find from their website, boneshakerbooks.com.
Cool. Yeah. And we will have a link below if you want to go check them out. They do have Mask of Fear up on their bookshop as well. So if you haven't bought a hard copy cover of that yet, do that. But thank you, Sarah, for featuring our bookstore of the week.
That's right.
And that turns us over to the Mask of Fear book discussion. So again, spoilers ahead, full spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, turn away now, go read it, come back. If you don't mind spoilers and just want to hear what all the fuss is about, stick around, and you'll get the lowdown on all of it. So with that, why don't we start, Sarah, with our overall thoughts on the book? You and I are notorious Alexander Freed stans.
That's correct.
The Alphabet Squadron trilogy is one of our favorite pieces of Star Wars media, one of our favorite Star Wars trilogies, one could say. Right. Mm-hmm, and those books changed us as people. I think that is actually, Shadowfall specifically was like one of the inciting book discussions for us to continue doing book discussions on the podcast. Like it was the one where I think we did such a deep dive into because of how messed up chapter 18 was.
That's right.
I think we just kind of got, and it was COVID, it was middle of COVID,
right?
Early onset COVID. And I think it was exactly what we needed in that moment.
And by needed, we mean, I don't know if we needed chapter 18, but we certainly experienced it. And we're different people because of it. But whatever broke me in chapter 18 was healed in the final chapter of Victory's Price. So all is forgiven for the pain that Alexander Freed put me through in that series. And, I've come to expect a certain level of pain in an Alexander Freed book and a certain level of world building and density and level of thought and care in his books that I think is so particular to his writing style and to how he sees Star Wars, that I was just so excited for this book. And also I'm sorry, we're gonna rehash this emotion for me because I need it. When they were like, when Random House Worlds now was like, we're doing a trilogy about Mon, Bail, and Saw in the rise of the Empire and the birth of the rebellion up, and it's by Alexander Freed, Rebecca Roanhorse, and Fran Wilde. I was like, they're doing it for me? Like, out of my mind levels of joy. Like, I went to go tell my parents about it and I just started laughing. Like, I couldn't get the words out because I was so overflowing with joy that I just would laugh. So to be here in the aftermath of having read this book and to be in Andor season as well, I just feel like I'm on cloud nine. I'm on top of the world. I can go shout my love for these things on the rooftops. This book is so complex and deep and thoughtful, and it brings such dimension to all of its characters, and it's so twisty, and it's exactly what I want from an Alexander Freed book. And so I love it. I'm here for it. I love it. I'm grateful. Alexander Freed, please come back to the Star Wars anytime. We'd love to have you. And by we, I'd mean Friends of the Force really specifically. We're just really big fans. We're really big fans.
Yeah, Alexander, we can't do the 4-year wait again. I mean, we can if we eventually get a book.
And we will if we need to. We're patient people. We're not we don't want to demand anything.
Maybe like 3.5, like a little a little three-ster in there, throw us a little bone. Yeah, when this announcement happened, it was one of the most exciting because we had for a while speculated that he would get brought on to the High Republic in maybe one of the phases. Didn't end up happening, but I think this is actually like right up his alley. It was like perfection considering, Mon is a character that he really loves and he wrote in Victory's Price. And so now getting to take a deeper dive into Mon
Rogue One novelization.
Rogue One and Contingency Plan and No Contingency. So like a lot of great.
That final eulogy for Jen. Don't even look
truly. But so much great Alexander content in Star Wars. And I feel like something I really underestimated when I jumped into this book is how much we actually know about these characters, right? Like think about all the screen time that we've had with Mon, with Bail, with Saw. There's a lot of it. And we don't necessarily get that Saw POV in this book, although we do spend a lot of time with Saw on the page than we typically have. I mean, other books like Rebel Rising, we've gotten some Saw in.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of the other books that we've seen him. I'm blanking off the top of my head, but Rebel Rising is the one that jumped out to me immediately. But Bail and Mon, we haven't really got a lot of POVs from, except for the return, a certain point of view, Eclipse and the Mon stories and A New Hope and Return of the Jedi. So actually getting so much a thick book with those POVs and to really understand the characters on a much deeper level and then make a lot of those straight line connections to what we've seen in Andor season 1. And hopefully in a month and a half from now, we can go back, reread and make some new through lines to Andor season 2. And then we have kind of this beautiful saga, I would call it, of these like 3 books that are going to come out, 2 seasons of Andor, and then, one Rogue One movie. This is what I'm trying to say. And I just think that's like so cool. I know people say like, oh, I'm so tired of this time period. And we've gotten it so much. I'm like, I will never be tired of this time period. This time period is so essential. It is the most important time period to talk about, especially in the state of the world that we are living in. Like we need that reminder to be like, this is not normal, by the way. It's not normal in your fiction. So it certainly shouldn't be normal in your real world when there are real people's lives on the line and people are dying and people are experiencing economic disaster in their lives. Like none of this is normal, right?
Right.
I'm yapping here. Please stop me. Any response to what I've just said?
Yeah. Because you're talking about this like, we're going to have these 3 books plus Andor's season 1 and 2. We already know that season 2 is going to lead right into Rogue One. Rogue One leads right into New Hope. I love that we're getting more and more of this picture. Like we're getting to put together more and more of the puzzle pieces of this era. And I think that it's really important, not just to our real world, because I think your point about it's not normal in our fiction and it shouldn't be normal in our real world. You're 100% correct about it. I also think that it's really important for Star Wars. For so long, Star Wars was just, here's the bad guys and the good guys win. And then here's how the bad guy becomes bad guy. He wasn't always a bad guy, and the middle chunk of that of how do we get from the bad guy to like the bad government, we get a piece of that in the rise of Palpatine, of course, in Order 66 and all of that. But there's so much that happens from Order 66 to, galactic wide stormtroopers and the completion of the Death Star and just the galactic domination, the fascism of the Empire. There's so many choices that are made every day that lead us to that end result where we finally, where the rebels are finally able to take a step out of the dark and and make some moves to win. And so I think that, the story of Star Wars, we've talked about this certainly before plenty of times, but the story of Star Wars is so archetypal, and it's so it's not totally black and white, but it's simple. It's easy to understand when you go and you watch A New Hope. You know who you're supposed to be rooting for, and you know why you're supposed to be rooting for them, right? Because the bad guy is bad. And I love that we get so much more texture in this era of why the bad guys are bad and why the good guys are good, and maybe the gray areas in between bad and good, and figuring out what is important and what alliances need to be made and coalition building. There's so much texture in this era that all of these incredible writers and creatives are helping to tell us. And I think that that's also, as you mentioned, important for our real world, because there are bad guys and good guys in this world, certainly. And there are a lot of people, most of us, in fact, that make a series of choices, sometimes that are bad and sometimes that are good, or sometimes that are helpful to causes that we care about and sometimes that are not helpful to causes that we care about. And the complexities of that, and also understanding what it takes to band together with someone we might not always agree with 100%, but we align on our enemy, and we align with, maybe knowing that something needs to be done. Like, that stuff is important too. So I think that's what we begin to get here as the Mask of Fear sets up the relationship between these three characters, knowing their various fates and how they move throughout, the rest of the saga.
What makes this book so intriguing to me is that there is no formed rebellion either, right? Like, we had the Delegation of 2000, which we'll talk about in a minute here to kind of open the conversation wider. But again, there's no alliance, there's no rebellion. So what makes it challenging in the early days of the Empire is how do you have these small acts of resistance to the encroaching dictatorship of Palpatine, which at this time in the galactic time period, this book really hammers home the point that the war is over, the Emperor has brought peace, and for your average Joe Schmo, that's good enough. I'm happy about that.
Like that's a solid improvement.
Right.
And I get it. It is. Having peace is a solid improvement over war. But at what cost are we now getting this peace? And that's what we're learning in this book. And it's and what do we trade for peace and security? And the answer is like your privacy and your rights. But these things also aren't it isn't either or. It's not either peace or a complete lack of rights. So, and that's what makes it complicated and interesting, right? Finding where the median lines are.
Yeah, and you kind of have Palpatine coming in going, this way of democracy that we had wasn't working. Like, I came in, I got the Emergency Powers Act, I ended the war. The democracy that we knew of yesterday was not working for the people. I came in and turned things around, right? And so he can continue to kind of use that narrative. And again, the people are satiated while he's slowly dismantling the democracy from the inside, right? Like the senators are feeling their grip slipping away. They understand the threat of the executive over the Senate, over the judiciary. And that's the whole impetus of the Rebirth Act in this book that Mon tries to get the votes for, pass, and because it's like, we got to protect the Senate. Like, we have to protect the one rule of law, and the Emperor is not the rule of law. And we have to maintain that separation, right? But it's hard when your constituents, again, are just, they're kind of like, he's sort of popular to them because he ended the war. So it's like, how do you whip those votes? How do you build those coalitions, right? And that's the challenge of Mon in this book. Bale is on his own journey of justice and truth, because like the absence of truth and the gradual decline of the absence of truth is like probably the greatest threat to democracy, not only in Star Wars, but in our world, and that's his mission. Meanwhile, Mon is like, let's retain our purpose. Like, I love politics. I got into this for a reason, and I want to prove that there are still a reason to love it.
Right. And prove that there's a reason for it to exist.
Right.
And say, you know, despite everything, what we're doing here is important, and it's a fundamental good. And I think that there's like a lot of value in that, because it's being hopeful in a broken institution and still fighting for it anyway, as opposed to tearing it all down. And I think that because if you tear it all down, you know, what gets rebuilt, what is built in the ashes. So,
and we see
it's
what's and that's sort of looming in my mind as I read this. We know in A New Hope the Senate is disbanded finally. Like, that was Palpatine's, like,
took him low key, took him a while.
Yeah, it did.
Well, he really attempted to maintain some sort of illusion for a really long time, and there's no way that was successful.
I think he likes the illusion that democracy still exists, because he knows no matter what happens, he will win. And that's what happens in this book. They pass the Rebirth Act, and Masameda tells Mon, yeah, we like some parts of the bill, but all the other parts he's going to veto.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
Mon's like, you can't do that. He has no power to do that. And he's like, no, the emperor is the law.
He's like low-key the emperor.
He literally says, like, I am the Senate, like, you know, and that continues.
Well, you know
this.
What? He kind of does. He kind of does say that specifically.
Let's take a moment though to maybe rewind the clock to Rot's 20th anniversary.
Not to completely derail from our conversation, but we're recording this the same day that the 20th anniversary special edition of Rot's has been announced, fully annotated by the one, the only Mr. Stover himself. The end papers, the sprayed edges, you know, the it's like the plastic cover, so it's like see-through. You know what? Okay, sometimes I'm a little cynical about all the special editions, the special edition boom of books. Sometimes I get a little grumpy about it. I looked at this book today and I went, oh, I'm in. And then I took a step back and said, oh, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite for this. And now I'm you know, I still am, but I will be buying this. I will be buying this because holy moly, the annotations
we are nothing
alone,
if not predictable.
Seriously. I'm so excited. So we are in to your point, and to get back on the topic, we are in the 20th anniversary of Rot's. And it's funny because, let me go back to the book first. It comes out in October. Mark your calendars, get your pre-orders in, because I feel like we're going to be wanting to read those annotations. I know I will, because here I am thinking about one lone candle can ignite the stars every day of my life. That being said, going back to Rot's 2005, it's kind of funny how a deleted scene has become one of the most important canonical pieces of Star Wars in the past 20 years. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's set the stage for listeners who aren't familiar. So there's a deleted scene. There's actually kind of two, but I think one more so is the basis for it all. Right. A deleted scene where senators are meeting in Bail Organa's office. These include Bail, Mon Mothma, played by a very young Genevieve O'Reilly. Right, we never actually see her in Rot's. This is the only time that she got cast in the movie.
So funny, because I love how they were like, "Hey, Genevieve O'Reilly, it's 2015 now. It's been 10 years since you got cut from this role, from your scenes in Revenge of the Sith. But we would like to ask you to please come back. We will give you a paycheck this time, and you will be in the credits because we will put you in the movie in Rogue One." And she's like, "Yeah, all right, sure. I like a paycheck. Let's go." And then they call her back another 8 years later and are like, "Hey, so we got another one for you." And this is like a really big one. I just imagine like taking this like tertiary role in 2005. She's in her 20s. You know, it gets cut. Like, that's a bummer. Could have been in the Star War. I'm not in the Star War. And then 10 years later gets a call to play this role again. And then another 10 years later gets a call to play the role again. And that role is so defining. I mean, obviously she's got lovely credits. Like, she's been working, you know, it's not like she hasn't done other projects, but the fact that this deleted scene 20 years ago became a major starring role for her as the same character is wild.
It is very, very wild. And I was actually going back in time the other day because I was feeling nostalgic, and I pulled up the article where she got announced. It was in November of 2020. They released an article on StarWars.com with Denise Goff, Kyle Soller, Stellan Skarsgård, and Genevieve O'Reilly announced for the cast of Andor. And like 2020 was just such a shit year. And we got that one lone candle. But let's play a clip from the deleted scene here real quick.
Now that he has control of the Jedi Council, the Chancellor has appointed governors to oversee all star systems in the Republic.
When did this happen?
Oh, that decree was posted this morning.
Do you think he'll dismantle the Senate?
Why bother? As a practical matter, the Senate no longer exists.
The Constitution is in shreds. Amendment after amendment.
We cannot let 1,000 years of democracy disappear without a fight.
What are you suggesting?
Suggesting? I apologize. I don't mean to sound like a separatist.
We are not separatists trying to leave the Republic. We are loyalists trying to preserve democracy in the Republic.
I can't believe it has come to this. Chancellor Palpatine is one of my oldest advisors. He served as my ambassador when I was queen.
Senator, I fear you underestimate the amount of corruption that has taken hold in the Senate.
The Chancellor has played the Senate as well. They know where the power lies, and they will do whatever it takes to share in it.
And we cannot continue debating about this any longer. We have decided to do what we can to stop it. Senator Mon Mothma and I are putting together an organization.
Say no more, Senator. I understand. At this point, some things are better left unsaid.
Sarah, what are your thoughts on this scene? How do you think it's kind of setting the stage for the Mask of Fear? And like, also, why do you think it kind of remains one of these just hidden gems of not only ROTS, but of Star Wars?
Setting up the Mask of Fear. It's funny because if it had been included like this scene, it would have maybe have been a little bit more difficult to make it all work, because there's something very simple about Bail saying, so Mon and I we're putting together a team. And then Padme's like, let's stop there. But it's so much more complicated than just Bail saying, like we're putting something together. Especially when we get to this book, when their relationship is a little bit more contentious than, or a little bit more difficult than a sort of like, we're building an alliance and let's talk about it. They're really at odds because Padme was their glue. And I think it's really interesting that Padme was like, I'm going to kind of stay out of it in this moment. Don't say more. Don't let me in more than I need to be let in, sort of a thing. And so there's a lot of intrigue in this scene. And I also love the politics of it. It's very interesting, of course. And, why it remains so important. It remains so important because these are the characters that we see, in being important to the original trilogy. They have to have some sort of origin story here. And it's just crazy that the origin story is the one thing that kind of got cut. But I'm glad that it did, because it remains helpful to, it's like a piece of Legends, that we're like, we're going to bring that character in. Why not? We're just going to add a little flavor, change him up a little bit, but he's still the same character or whatever. It's here to add a little flavor, give us a little, a baseline to then build from. And because it's not in the movie and therefore not capital C canon, it's like lowercase c canon, we get to build and adapt and iterate on it in a way that we wouldn't necessarily, by we, I mean creatives, I don't mean myself, but like that they wouldn't have necessarily been able to do so if it was still in the movie.
This one is so fascinating. And I think one of the reasons that it both sets up Mask of Fear and is so important to the mythos of Star Wars and Rebellion is Padme. Because Padme is, I don't know of the three extras in this scene, but Padme of our core three is the only one who doesn't make it past this film. And you have Bail. Actually, I guess there's kind of like a running theme in this book that Bail and Mon, right? They're kind of at odds with each other. They don't quite agree on everything, or at least the way about the agree on how they go about things. But whenever they were around Padme, it seemed like all the pieces fit together. Like she was kind of the glue that said, despite your differences, let's come together. And so when we think of like forming rebellion, I feel like a lot of it was in the spirit of this meeting. It's like, well, what do we do? Like, let's go back to how we felt during the delegation of 2000, like how we felt in that moment, how Padme made us feel in that moment. And like, let's try to recapture that. Like, let's not let liberty die in my office on that day. Liberty lives, and liberty dies. This is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause, is the epigraph of this book, right? It sets the stage. It reminds us that yes, Anakin Skywalker is a core part of the movie, but like this is actually the meat of the story, is how democracy dies. And so I think when you pair that moment in the Senate with this moment in Bail's office, Bail Organa feels like he owes so much to Padme, and the memory of Padme caring for her daughter. There's just so much emotional guilt there. And I think by the end of the book, he kind of gets a little bit past that. And he's like, I can form a new tomorrow for my daughter, and not necessarily in the name of the Jedi. I don't have to like live up to their legacy, but I do need to live up to the legacy of Padme to make her daughter proud. And it's like this kind of moment where they build those kinships together that allow the rebellion to happen. Let's start with Mon, though. Mon Mothma, the absolute best.
Oh, the GOAT. Honestly, me and Mon Mothma forever.
I cannot wait to see more Genevieve O'Reilly in season 2.
Look, I look forward to it. I also fear it because I've seen those trailers. I know the pain we're all about to endure. Dancing Mon, I live in fear. Thank you.
But Mon Mothma, I think talking about the delegation of 2000, kind of coming off of that deleted scene, we can maybe start there, which one of the things that was the most interesting was the arrests for people who partook in that delegation, who signed that treaty to try to thwart the emperor because of his just unlimited power at that time. And the fact that they were all brought to the ISB and had to pledge their loyalty. Mon was held there for 37 hours. She soiled herself. She was thrown against a wall and had her head banged. So she was pretty much concussed the entire time she was in that cell. It was not a good time. No. Really not a good time. Palpatine taking political prisoners at that point. And it was interesting because there was a comment about how the public viewed the delegation of 2000 as like a negative, even though their aims were good, but they thought like, you're thwarting his attempt at peace. He wants to end the war. Why are you stopping him?
Yeah, you're just stirring up shit at this point, and we're trying to make moves, and the arrests are really interesting by the ISB because good news is they're not, doing the whole Dr. Gorst situation on these senators. But what they are doing, even if they don't plan to keep them long term, is to create a chilling effect among the Senate and with these senators that speaking up will cause you problems. And you felt so dehumanized because you stood in a room for 30 plus hours with no help, and you had to, relieve yourself and pass the time, right? And how dehumanized do you feel in those that day and change? And do you really want to feel that but worse again? And so it's a really forceful and scary move from the Empire, but it's also just like an opening salvo. It's very small potatoes compared to a lot of the things that the Empire then goes on to do, both in this book and in Andor and beyond.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating that the whole idea of these arrests were that he's trying to thwart anti-government groups. And there's this quote from Mon. I don't know which chapter it's in. I think she's actually. I think this is actually after she kills Sojin later in the book, It says, quote, "Our trouble isn't that Palpatine is a dictator or that he has total control of the military. Our trouble is that, by and large, all exceptions aside, the citizens of our nation are willing to believe his lies, ignore his purges, and accept his rule in return for stability. They may not want him, but they don't want war. They want anything but war. And Palpatine has boxed us in so that war appears to be the only way out. So if we believe in democracy, if we believe the will and wisdom of the people is sacred and that they have a right to determine their destiny, how do we square that with what we're trying to accomplish? The Emperor is a threat to democracy. Opposing him is also anti-democratic." So it's like these two conflicting ideals where it's like the people think he's democratic, so opposing him is anti that, but we know that he is a threat to democracy and we're trying to stop him. And it's not unlike what we're seeing in our own world between, one side saying he's trying to preserve the security of our country, whereas the other side, which is the right side, is saying no, he is taking political prisoners and he is deporting them from our country because of political dissent, not in the name of security. He just wants to throw out whoever disagrees with him, both from the country and in his administration. But to oppose a dictator is to oppose democracy, according to some, right?
Well, yes, because the dictator tells you what truth is and tells you what the rules are.
Right.
And truth is something that is clearly easily manipulated, both fictionally and in real life.
Yeah. So I think the idea of just arresting people and having them pledge a loyalty, I think it's just terrifying. It's terrifying because it sets a precedent. It boxes in these senators and tells them to stay in line. And that's why I think Mon has to tread so carefully with this Rebirth Act, because she knows what she's up against. She has to attack it with the right precision, the right people. All of this happening while the Separatists are reintegrating, and people are protesting that Separatists are war criminals. Like, why would we let them back in? But Mon also knows that they are the key to all of this. They have to get the Separatist support because of where they are. Like, they will take any deal at this point. So they can't take the wrong deal where Palpatine can abuse them and take away their corporate power and so on and so forth. So she's got to broker with some unsavory people because of that. She's got to rub up with some elites, rub up with some wealthy business owners who are, typically in opposition to her.
It's an interesting situation for the galaxy to be in because there's such animosity towards the Separatists for everything that came before, and they're being folded back in because folding them back in gives Palpatine more power, right? Because then you have more people to subject who are doing that a little bit more willingly than if they were independent. But then, everybody's kind of getting to a point where potentially the enemy of my enemy is also my friend, or my enemy, we share a common foe, therefore we are friends, and or we have to work together. And I think that's like the sticky thing about coalition building, and the sticky thing about politics is that you have to play nice sometimes with people that you vehemently disagree with. And I think for some people, especially those on the outside, it's easy to look at that and feel so disgusted that, your fave politician, even if they're not like a fave, stan fave, but like your fave politician, maybe the politician you trust most or align the most politically with, has to work with somebody on the complete other aisle who has, the most egregious views in your mind, but they share a common enemy or they share a common goal. And their ways of getting there are differently, or the ways of thinking about it are different, but they have to come together in order to maintain some sense of autonomy and also to help the most amount of people possible. And like, that's a difficult thing about coalition building too, because it requires a lot of compromise, and compromise is incremental, or compromise creates incrementalism rather than major change. It's just complicated, but I'm glad that this is a storyline that this book kind of dives into, because it's like a really vital piece of politics, and, one that is present no matter where you go in the world, whether you have a multi-party system where sometimes multiple parties need to come together in order to form a coalition government, or you have a two-party system where things are really opposed to one another. I think this sort of storyline is valuable. It's also something we kind of get in Bloodline a little bit with Ransom Casterfo.
Oh yeah, totally.
This coalition building with somebody you don't always agree with. Although we really like Casterfo at the end of the day.
And I think it makes the bill that much more complicated because she has to put so many compromises in there for so many people. I love the moment when Bale looks at it later when she's in the hospital. He's like, what the hell?
Yeah, he's like, because he knows you're going to lose some other people by compromising for others, that you're going to have to lose some other people. And also like, wow, what sort of mess did she get herself into in order to get here?
Mm-hmm. But I thought some of the most powerful scenes in this book was when she was on Hesperidium, which is one of the 4 Coruscant moons. And she's like basically in a dark room with Novolio. She's finally granted audience, and they're kind of going back and forth. She's like, hey, you attempted assassination on on Padme. And he's like, you sent a clone army after us, right? And they're kind of going back and forth. And I think ultimately they get to a place where it's like, we both could have prevented this. Who says we weren't warned about this type of thing happening? We can't fail the galaxy a second time. And he puts a pistol to her head and basically is like, would you die to restore democracy? And she's like, absolutely. And he's like, would you give me the names of your allies? And she's like, nope. And he's like, great, that's the answer I needed. And I was like, damn, like she stuck to her guns.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah.
Like she did not give a shit what happened to her. She was just like, I mean, in that moment she was ready to die for democracy. She's like, I'm telling you the truth, and I will not give up the names of the people I'm siding with.
I think that's such a power. It's like a superpower of hers, is that she so fundamentally believes in the importance of her job, but not for herself, but for people broadly. And I think she really understands that the work she does is in service of others. And so I really respect her point of view in that regard.
It makes it that much more complicated to know the facade she does put on.
Oh, totally.
Throughout her political career through into Andor. And so, looking ahead to season 2, we know the Gorman massacre is going to happen. We know from previous material that she gives a speech, and that's when, rebels, Hera and the crew pick her up after that speech. And so it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while till she can really be authentically herself in some ways. I think she'll like fight the fight that she can here and there, but she's going to have to pick and choose her battles, especially because she's on their radar with this Rebirth Act at the end. And she knows she's got to tread very carefully because she's on the radar. She's got to get off the radar a little bit.
I think that's what's so interesting kind of about her. And again, makes me wonder, like, well, why didn't Palpatine dissolve the Senate earlier? Is because she was known to the ISB and she was known to the Empire as somebody that is not a fan, like literally immediately, because of her participation in the delegation of 2000. And then this Rebirth Act, like she keeps being a thorn in her side, in the Empire's side throughout, decades until we get from, Rots to Rogue One. And I think that's so fascinating because they followed her, like her drivers are plants at this point. And we learn things about Zuna in this book, and maybe whatever Haki is trying to do. We know she's being watched, but she's not being stopped. Like she's kind of causing trouble for the Empire throughout the couple of decades that they rise.
Yeah, and I think she's drawing more of that attention as she's seeking support. I think one person in particular she gets asked about is Lud Maroy, who is a senator from Troith, with Shadowfall.
I've heard of that before.
One of the Cerberon moons, or Cerberon moon, I think. Yeah, where Chapter 18 happens. So
another super city.
Heck yeah. Yeah, just like Aoa Dejuritz.
Alexander Freed and his love for the city planet.
Yeah,
Let's
the
talk about
ancient
it.
dead city. I love it. The one that used to house trillions of people. It's interesting. He builds all these like big planets that used to house trillions and trillions of people, and are always described as like what Coruscant, the old Coruscant, and eventually Coruscant will probably become that as well at some point in its time, right? So all worlds die. So just like George Lucas says, all democracies die because they're given away. But yeah, because she gets brought in a second time, and she says like she's having an affair with Ludd.
Oh my gosh!
Just to get out, but she keeps walking on eggshells. And I think she's getting that time she first got arrested by the ISB used against her to say like, we'll hold you here for another 30 hours again. Like, don't tempt us. And that's where she kind of has to say that about Ludd. Because I think if she says the wrong thing, game's over, jig's up.
Her making that political calculation to say that she's having an affair with Ludd is like so interesting, because like she knows it's going to hurt Ludd in some ways too. And she knows it might hurt Perrin too. And it's going to hurt herself because of course a woman is always, blamed for everything, especially in relationships gone bad more than a man in a lot of cases. But you see her thinking on her feet in real time and figuring out what is the best way out of this moment, and recognizing that there are no good ways, and choosing the best worst option. And it's interesting to kind of see her work through that, and to see her then make those sorts of choices through Andor too.
Ludd's an interesting character, by the way. He was kind of giving me like Tay Kolma vibes. It seems like Mon.
He's kind of a similar name,
Yeah.
Tay, Kolma, Ludd, Maroi. They have the same kind of cadence to them, but also like Ludd Maroi is like a super Star Wars name.
Totally.
I love it.
I get the sense that Mon had all of these men in her life when she was younger that are like, a lot of them are the ones that could have gotten away. Like, granted, some of them are just like very young friends, but there's one line about Perrin in this book, which was, when they're together, things could be wonderful. When they were apart, neither thought of the other. Don't marry too young, because the companionship is glorious and the loneliness is awful. And, she's reflecting later in the book how, her and Ludd are kind of teasing each other after the bill passes. And, she's kind of reminiscing and thinking of like, what if they did run away? She teases him and says like, what are we supposed to do? Like, I go with you and I teach history. And he's like, no, you coach a smash ball team. And she's like, that's a fantasy. I can't do that. But in her mind, it's what she wants. And so I get the sense there's more maybe romantic feelings that she might have had for Ludd than maybe for Tay. But like, there is also like a little bit of that with Tay in season 1 of Andor, where you feel like there's something more there. Perrin's kind of giving him side eye and is like, hey, your guy over there, you're talking to him.
She's like, Jesus Christ, I can have male friends. Good Lord.
Right. Yeah. But also at the same time, I think there's like this loneliness that's gnawing at her, where it's like any of these men that she knows from Chandrila or in her political career, it's like, I don't know, like how could things be different maybe?
Yeah, it's like finding different aspects of maybe a relationship that she doesn't have with Perrin in other people in her life, and you kind of just see the way she falls into comfortable speech with them in a way that she doesn't quite let her guard down with Perrin. And so to see her like trust in that way is really interesting. And it's kind of a shame that she doesn't have that particular companionship that she's looking for, because she's more or less stuck with Perrin.
Oh, Perrin.
Oh, Perrin. Is that the transition to talking a little bit about Perrin?
I don't have much else to say on Perrin, but unless you do, but I know there's one passage that was interesting about this lovely crinkle in his brow that reminds her of an innocence that never really existed. Not at 15 when they had wed in the ancient tradition, not in the months after when they'd carried on as awkward and passionate and spiteful a romance as two teenagers, not at 20 when they'd fallen out and decided that there would be no children, no shared bed, no questions, not at 24 when the pendulum had swung back and kept swinging until it reached their current equilibrium, or of late they'd lived separate lives, but they didn't hurt each other. And so I think that was a passage where we got a little bit more history of their, from marriage to now. And you can definitely see like that breakdown where it really was just this kind of forced marriage because of tradition, and it quickly fell apart very, very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, and it's just that they were kids, and and then they were also thrust into politics, because if she got married at 15 and then she was in the Senate at 16, that's crazy work. And she's also leaving Chandrila to do that. And so there's this thing of like, well, we need to somehow get on. We need to somehow figure it out. And there's been no right answer in their relationship. But right now, maybe it's okay. It's like the okayest it's been in a while. If we're not hurting each other, then we're fine. And it's kind of a shame that like fine is their good. So I think that's interesting. And it's also like really interesting, not to jump all the way to the end of this book, because I know we're going to talk about chapter 68 a little bit later, kind of as its own specific thing. But the end of this book ends with a chapter called Intimacy, where Mon makes a choice. They make a choice together to, essentially sleep together. And I think we can all go, choices were made. Choices were made.
And I think we can also go, that's Lita.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's interesting too, because it's like this moment of chapter 68 is kind of like where this book has its crux. And then everything after that is kind of just and here's what happened next sort of a feeling, as opposed to the end. It's like a denouement, honestly, of this book, as opposed to, as opposed to the sort of punchiness of 68, which is of a similar sort of climactic peak to like the end of Rising Storm, right? Like Rising Storm really ends on a punch. And I think like 68 ends on a punch, and then 69, 70, 71, 72 kind of are a little bit quieter. But yeah, I think we kind of get the feeling of like maybe this was a mistake, or maybe this moment of quietness that she's kind of thinking about the world around her, causes her some troubles in the future, which is maybe some glory, like in some beautiful moments in the future, but also some trouble. And like, that's a somber, sad kind of thing to think about.
Yeah. And if the previous passage I read, they said at 20, they decided there would be no children. And here she is, they're probably conceiving Lita in this moment. And so that if Lita is a mistake, right? Did Mon not originally want to have children because she knew of this tradition and how unhappy it made her in her life, and she wouldn't want to have a kid go through that potentially, right? Like I don't want to raise a kid where it's like, hey, you're forced into a marriage, you're lonely, and we see in Andor season 1 that her and Lita kind of have like a very tumultuous relationship. Lita is very much about the old way of Chandrila. Vel kind of makes fun of it at one point, and we know there's a very traditional wedding probably coming in season 2 from the trailer. So, I just wonder if Mon feels like she's kind of failed in that respect to Lita, based on what she had to go through as well. So now there's like, maybe there's some disappointment there of like, I couldn't stop this from happening. And maybe that's where, we see eventually Mon is completely removed from her family, because maybe she just kind of chalks it up as a loss, makes it all the more tragic.
It's also sad because, maybe another part of that equation is, not in the months after, where as they carried on an awkward and passionate and spiteful romance as two teenagers can hope for, that they came to the realization of like, maybe we as a duo shouldn't be bringing a kid into the world. It's not just Mon and saying, well, I'm a woman in this loveless marriage and I'm suffering in ways that I can never articulate to another person, and I wouldn't want to bring somebody else into that, especially a girl. And I think it's another layer on top of that to say, and I don't love Perrin, and we're stuck together, and that is what it is. But he's not the person that I would want to raise a child with, that I would want to be my companion in that role of my life. And so there's a bit of sadness for everybody there, because everybody deserves to make that choice. And also, kids deserve to be in families that love and care for them. And I'm not saying that like Mon and Perrin are lacking parents, right? But their struggles are on display before Leda, and their struggles are still on display after Leda. And Leda knows that they struggle. And so that's probably hard for her just as much as it's hard for Mon and Perrin. So like that's a very complicated situation for all of them to be in.
I did not think we were going to get this deep with Perrin and Mon's love life here, but like here we are. You know, like I think this is so important to her, because of, again, like where we know she ends up and splitting off from her family to fight for the rebellion, right? That's a hard choice for her to make, probably. Like despite the drama and despite the feelings there, it's still probably a hard choice to walk away from that, you know, ultimately.
Oh,
And
I have no doubt.
I think once she's in the rebellion, she's like, this is the right choice. This is the least lonely I have ever felt because I'm surrounded by friends. Like I'm surrounded by Bale and Dandana and you know, all the people, right? So,
but I still think there's a loneliness to that because it's not a moment where any of them can be joyous. You know,
certainly,
even,
right? Yeah,
like Rogue One happens so quickly, and they're probably always on edge to figure out when is the right moment. What's our next mission? How are we building up together? There's probably some camaraderie in the rebellion once it's like the alliance and they're all together and it's not just like notes passed or we're not talking to each other or we're trying to figure things out or like Luthen causing shit, you know, like there's probably some companionship and good things there. But I imagine as a leader of this rebellion movement, which is now still underground, but also above ground because we know like her Gorman massacre speech happens. So like she publicly leaves the Senate in a very, in a way that paints a target on her. So there's still like a lot of being on edge in that space. And so I imagine that there's a stress to, being in the middle or like being closer to victory, but losing a lot in the process.
Mm-hmm. And I think at the same time, as stressful as it is to lead rebellion, I think it's liberating for her because jumping to this quote with when she meets with Sujin and kind of talking towards the end of the book, she says she thinks to her mind, she was tired of it all. She was tired of saying half of what she believed and being vilified for it. She was tired of the game she loved, and she hated everyone who had driven her to such a place. And so I say it was liberating for her to join the rebellion because here she is kind of being herself in the most visible way possible. And she doesn't have to hide behind that facade anymore. And so I'm excited for her to get to that place because I just feel like she is so lonely in this book, having to build coalition. She is lonely in Andor, having not even her home to feel safe in. And she's lonely in the Senate because she's like one of the few who are willing to publicly speak up and take that bullet. You know, in season 1, we haven't seen the Gorman massacre speech yet, but we know in season 1, there are several scenes with her making a plea about the Gormans and their trade lanes being cut off, etc. Right. So like we're kind of building to that in season 1, and she seems to be a very staunch proponent of their liberation and their self-determination. But how many other folks are saying that? So I think I'm excited that Mon kind of goes on this journey eventually. But let's talk about Sojin a little bit and her kind of at the end, a choice she makes, why she makes it, because this is a pretty dramatic moment for Mon's arc. This is the climax of her story here.
Totally.
Do you want to introduce us a little bit of that conversation with Sojin when they meet in the courtyard and kind of how it spirals from there?
Oh gosh. And Navolio has the 2 words that will allow Sujin to combust in the event that he needs to be stopped as an agent. And then Mon has this weight of those words. And Sujin is on a mission, and on a righteous mission, if you ask me. But Mon says maybe this isn't the moment for that. And I found this whole situation to be so shocking. Like, I think I gasped. Like, I don't know if I expected it. I mean, like, maybe I should have expected it the moment we learned that she knew the words, but like, I didn't quite expect it like this. She stops him from killing the emperor. And it adds an interesting layer of context to her involvement with Luthen, I think, in Andor.
Yeah, because Luthen is somebody who is willing to kill anybody or cut any loss.
Right.
And I think she criticizes him a bit for that.
Yeah.
Especially after Aldani. She's like, how could you do this? He's like, you joined the circle. Like, you know it was coming. And this really recontextualizes that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can talk a bit about Sojin here real quick too.
Yeah.
Kind of at large, but we do learn, Sojin was from this planet where his people were having trouble producing offspring, but they were, genetically good candidates to be modified by the separatists and essentially become these super soldiers, these assassins. And once the war ends, Sojin wakes back up in his Bactopod and he's kind of at a loss of like, what's my purpose? What do I do?
Right.
So he goes on this journey to find his last orders from the separatists. He can't really find anything. He feels like totally lost. And I think he kind of gets to a place where the closest he can get to justice is just continuing to inflict hurt on an uncaring universe, right? Like the Republic had promised aid, never delivered. And so he goes to Coruscant with Bail after they make a grand escape from Ayo Dejaritz. And there's a couple of like really interesting scenes that I want to touch on here.
Sure.
The first in the nightclub, when he goes to the nightclub full of like the wealthy elite on Coruscant. And he kind of pulls aside some people and he was asking like, what were you guys doing? Like when my world was blockaded by the Republic and the clones were doing killing. And the guy asks, what war?
What war? That's some Canto Bite. Also just collective forgetting of everything.
It's so wild to me. And it makes me wonder, like, again, it kind of speaks a little bit to maybe why Palpatine is popular again, right? Because you think of this core world where people are living pretty happily.
Mm-hmm.
The Siege of Coruscant happened, but who was affected the most is the lower levels.
Right.
The people that nobody thinks about typically.
Yeah. The people with the least amount of power.
Yeah. And so it just kind of makes me think of like the uninformed voter, like this guy asking what war, right? It's like, well, why did you vote for this person? Well, I don't know. It's like, well, did you know they said this? No. Okay. Well, are you paying attention? Like,
But also the what war of it all is like this idea that like wealth and status and a lack of proximity can just completely remove you from reality. Like
the privilege to forget these things or even acknowledge their existence.
Right. Like money, like that's the whole point of Canto Bite too. Like money, people say that money doesn't buy you happiness, but it buys you answers to whenever you're having a problem. So it functionally does buy happiness. If you're depressed, you can get the therapists and the medication. If you, are not feeling like yourself and you need a full makeover, you can go to the hairstylist and the shops and find a new look. You can, if you want to get away from something that's bad, like war or natural disaster or crime or whatever, you can travel away. You can buy answers to all your problems. And so you don't have to consider the suffering of others. And I think that's an important thing on Coruscant too, because Coruscant has such high highs and such low lows in terms of its class and status,
Yeah, totally. And I think this continues Sojin on a bit of a spiral here because again, his world inflicted so much pain. And when he goes back there with Bail and all the people are gone, I think that's a reminder of what his people went through. And even him and Bail are a bit at odds with Bale's support of the Republic and Bale trying to say the Jedi were, the good in the galaxy. And Sojin's like, well, the Jedi came down with their laser swords and, fought people on our world. And we see that in the Clone Wars. We see that in a lot of other material. But I think Sojin kind of gets to the point where he's like, I'm going to kill the Emperor with Mon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's like, this is my ultimate purpose. This is the most hurt I can inflict on the galaxy. Right? Like Bale's thinking, hey, let's reveal the truth. Let me use what Sojin has about the falsified Jedi stamp on one of the recordings, which is a wild thing, by the way, that can happen in Star Wars. Who would have thunk?
I was like, this whole fabrication is so messy. This is so messy.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I love that Hockey is like sending Bale on this journey. He actually finds out that it's true. That's like the most funny thing ever. She's like, oh shit, he found something actually.
It's like, oh man, I've been with him this whole time and he still found the answers. I was trying to lead him away from those. Damn it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like at the end, page 399, at the end of chapter 55. So I'm talking like right before she makes this choice. She says, if Sojin passed the bridge, she would be out of Mon's sight. She would relinquish all control. That's like an interesting line. She knew what she had to do. She knew the good, the right, and the necessary thing. And for a single instant, she imagined the assassination of Emperor Palpatine, and she only felt the deepest shame. It was time. It was time. And then in the next moments, she says the second word, which is the trigger, right, for him. And I think she realizes that, one, maybe murdering the head of their government is like not her thing as somebody who like works in the government and like fundamentally still believes in the government in some way. But two, she knows that in this moment, this will only cause more suffering and chaos in the galaxy because everybody's kind of okay with what's happening in the Empire right now because we're in this new moment, this new time. And to do so would be completely destabilizing. And so she's weighing this very difficult choice. And I think her response to him about this situation is, it's difficult because they just come from two different points of view.
Yeah, she says, because murder is an offense beyond any other, because if we act outside the courts, outside the law, we forfeit any claim to upholding the law's principles. It was wrong during war and it's wrong still because Palpatine aspires to be a dictator, but anything worse is unproven. His viziers and his governors will take his place and inherit Palpatine's approval ratings and nothing will change because you just can't slaughter people.
Yeah.
And it's so tough. It's so tough because you're like, Palpatine needs to go, right? Like we know that it has to happen at some point. But her point that like anything worse at this point is unproven, right? So we're not at the point yet where she's like, yes, let's blow up the Death Star full of trillions of people. So we're not quite there yet. The Emperor's not like this real known dictator quite yet, or Sith Lord even. And then her point that like, yeah, if we kill him, it makes him a martyr, and then somebody else takes his place, right? You can't cut the head off a snake because it just grows back. So like I get it, but the Star Wars brain part of me is like, let Sojin do it.
Oh, of course. Of course.
But I respect her answer in the moment because of where they are still in the early reign of the Empire. Like I understand why she also doesn't want to stoop to the Empire's level, right? Because it's like if you just throw all law out the window, are they any better than Palpatine at that point? If you can just assassinate political opponents, it makes it very messy and complicated.
But also if you're cutting off the head of your government at that point, there is a sense of just like an inherent sense of destabilization, unless somebody is prepared to come and swoop up in the vacuum of power and kind of be like, it's me, I'm leading now. And there isn't a coalition big enough to do that at this point yet.
Right. And we see how messy it is in post Return of the Jedi world too, right? Like it's not easy. It leads to the rise of the First Order again. So power vacuums get filled very quickly by loyalists. But
it's a difficult issue too, because it's like, let's say they did kill the emperor, they just create other problems because people who resented killing the emperor, even if somebody's there to come fill the vacuum of power and have an answer to the problems, like there's still this issue of, okay, well, there's still people who believe in him.
Yeah. Real quick too, the two keywords being oubliette and sublime. Okay, good. I thought you were maybe a secret separatist assassin. That was a test. Sarah did not combust. All my doubts up until this point have been resolved.
Chat.
Sorry,
I thought
Sarah.
he was commenting on the fact that I yawned at that point in time and could have caused a jaw pop. So I didn't catch on to the joke until 3/4 of the way through the joke. My bad. I got it now though.
Me saying those words actually made you yawn. It's your yawn
it's gonna
command.
happen again.
Ooh, oubliette. Oh, there we go. It's happening. It's happening live on camera for our audio listeners, which is everybody. But oubliette, it's a dungeon with an opening only in the ceiling. And then sublime means lofty, grand, exalted in thought, expression, or manner, high in place. Interesting. I don't know if I have any more thoughts on those two words as choices there, but like they both kind of have this like top of the ceiling, high in place, kind of elevated nature to these words. And I wonder if there's sort of a symbolism there. I'd be curious why those words were chosen, but I don't have any other thoughts aside from just mentioning those definitions.
Me either, but I think the definitions are good because I, before this book, did not know the word oubliette. So, you learn something new every day. Thanks, Alexander Freed.
So Mon kills Sujin.
Mm-hmm.
Big moment. She goes to the hospital, gets her stomach replaced. Her heart has metal in it, which there was this quote about how her body was not entirely her own, which was kind of the truth since she was interrogated by the Empire, which like that makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me very sad to read that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it feels okay. It reminds me of Leia, Princess of Alderaan, right? We know that Rhaeha has the I think she has like new lungs, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because she fell off the mountain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a sense of endurance with that and sort of perseverance through that. But Mon kind of seeing her wounds and the replacement organs as sort of as genuinely like a sort of foreign body in herself, and knowing that she lives in between multiple worlds and can never kind of be her full self, and that's why this feels right in its own kind of weird way. And I think that that's like particularly sad because especially the position that she's in this loveless marriage where she was married off as a teen and having to speak on behalf of her entire planet and then her entire coalition. And then she's not someone who ever can fully indulge in herself as a person named Mon. She can never fully express herself or be her full self because she does not even belong to herself. And there's a real sadness in that. Because that's not...
Yeah, totally.
It's not an unknown story for women, especially.
No, well said. Yeah, it was one of those gut punch moments, her waking up in that hospital. And I kind of, she's already at a low point, right? And she gets taken to some facility or some starship where Mas Ameda is, and you kind of see that guy and you go, oh God, this guy, can't be good.
No.
We alluded to it earlier. We know the bill passes, but he says, they're going to veto the provisions related to executive authority, which was like basically the whole point of the bill, which was to have oversight of Senate rules and to make sure that they retain their ability to operate as a Senate. And Mas says he is the emperor. This is the empire. His power, Senator Mothma, is absolute.
Ugh.
And
Ew.
Any attempt to rally support will be viewed quite rightly as a power grab enacted by corrupt senators clinging to old republic ways or to radical separatist ideologies. You saw the protests on Coruscant. Do you honestly believe that the pampered cosmopolitans of Chandrila outnumber the galaxy's tired and struggling? And I want to talk about this for a moment because this is like hitting so close, right? Because I feel like in our world, there's like this promise by the right to be like, we're going to get into government and we're going to clean up the waste and we're going to clean up the corruption.
Drain
and
the
like,
swamp.
Don't you, we're going to drain the swamp. Like, don't you, average American, like, don't you want us to drain the swamp and eliminate all inefficiency, right? And these people buy into this. They think that the wealthy billionaire, it has their interests, right? Like, and so like Masameda is kind of making that same argument here to say like, the people on Coruscant, you saw those protests. They don't like separatist ideology. They don't like war. They see like the institution of government as inherently corrupt by senators like yourself who come from rich worlds. They think that like by following the emperor's rule of law, like they're eliminating that corruption when really the emperor is the most corrupt of them all. And so they're kind of fed this bullshit all in the name of peace, right? Perceived peace. And we're seeing that in our own world where it's like the wealthy billionaire cutting thousands and thousands of federal worker jobs does not have your best interests at heart. The guy who is creating an economic global disaster because he wants to throw a temper tantrum does not have your best interests at heart. When will we learn? And I feel like that's the case here. And he's like using that against her to say like, you come from Chandrila. Nobody has your back. You're rich. You're elite.
Yeah. There's this, and it's not a completely unfounded perception either of like, sometimes people are in it too long and they lose sight of and they become the institution in a way that's not good because they lose sight of what they started doing it for,
Also true. Yeah, you can hold on to your power too long.
Think about how if you follow Nancy Pelosi's stock buys and sales, you do pretty well in your stocks, like there are people who hang on to it for too long and that's what creates this expectation of this sort of elitism not able to do anything. But also the perception of that is a powerful tool, and the feeling that people have towards you outweighs what you're actually doing a lot of the time.
And reform is needed. Yeah. Like reform is always needed. Reform is always a good thing, right? We have to continue looking at the ways that we do things, right?
Oh, sure.
And I think Palpatine uses that against the people to say, like, I ended the war. I have all these other great ideas as well. So, right. Will you buy into what I'm selling? But like, we all know what he's truly selling underneath, and that gradual progression of power happens way over time. And that's what Moss says to her, right? He says they have grand plans for the galaxy, not just for the next year or the next 5 years, but for the next century. We are the architects of the universe our grandchildren will live in, and it will be one where there is no conflict, no dissent, and no visionaries who would undo the work of their betters. Every child will learn a superior history, be raised in a superior family, and the concept of defiance will be as antiquated as the spear. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot there.
He's saying a lot.
Would you go to war with the Empire, or would you really start a war with Mon Mothma, knowing the cost would inevitably fail on the wretched, the exhausted creature still limping from the separatist conflict? Would you go to war against the Emperor? Because if not, there's no threat you can make that we cannot counter with overwhelming force. He's basically telling her she's lost. And it's such a gut punch in this book to get through all of this shit and finally pass the bill. And as readers, like, I was kind of like, oh shit, they actually did this early in the days of the Empire. Like, we actually kind of did it. And like, maybe that made Palpatine upset. Nope. Vetoed.
Right.
Vetoed the most important parts. Of course he would. Why would I think better of the galaxy at this stage,
Yeah. And That comment of would you go to war against the emperor? Because if not, there's no threat that you can make that we would not counter with overwhelming force. I'll be so honest with you. I'm about to make the real world connection. It's the if you go against Trump, Elon Musk will primary the shit out of you with his money.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how can you go? Which, I mean, we saw a little of this proven out recently in a positive way for literally everyone. In terms of Elon Musk versus literally everybody else on the planet. Shout out to literally everybody else on the planet for winning the Wisconsin Supreme Court judge election.
Shout out for getting him to waste $25 million on a race he actually had no interest in.
Let's do it again. Till he's out of money. But no, let's not. But the point that he's making though in this is we have a monopoly on the power. We have a monopoly on all the resources that we could ever need to crush you politically, crush you in propaganda, crush you physically, crush your people, crush your coalition. We have all of it. And I think that's like a really scary position to be in. And I mean, I think it's a scary position for potentially some Republicans who don't like Trump but also are afraid to speak out against them because they also like having a job and they also like having power. And so they kind of choose not to have a spine in that regard because they don't want to step out of line. But it's a little bit different in this context because these two people are already on opposite sides. It's not like we're on the same side and you better stay on my side. Which is kind of what's happening in IRL. But these two people are on opposite sides, and I will not hesitate to use every tool that I have in order to end you and your ideas. And I will end you in our ideas because we have plans on plans on plans with the superior history in the superior family. And we've got 100 years worth of plans. And like, that's really scary stuff. It feels like David and Goliath at that moment. And ultimately, like the rebellion gets their big moment a couple of years, like 20 years down the line. But kind of being told in no uncertain terms that like this empire is not hurting for, hurting for power. And like, sure, oppression is effort and these sorts of things, but they have no issue making the effort.
It's also very telling, by the way, that he does call citizens wretched, exhausted creatures.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like this is how they see their constituents. They know they're fooling them. They know they're getting bamboozled. And by the time the public at large realizes Palpatine's true intentions, it will have been too late because he will have embedded himself so deeply into the fabric of democracy and basically thwarted in the process that he's immovable. And how immovable can you be also with a Sith Lord enforcer at your side named Darth Vader, who can basically snuff out all resistance, all forms of it, if you need to.
Don't mention the planet killing machine that you have in your back pocket.
Also, that's happening. Yeah. And I wonder, by the way, if we'll see more of that in future books, perhaps alluded to. Like, we know they can't find it out until, past season 1 of Andor, because we don't know about it at that point, minus the post-credit scene. But I wonder, we might hear it maybe through the grapevine of like resource excavation and maybe like mining and stuff like that happening on planets that they're trying to protect. But
do you ever think about the Songs of Forgotten Worlds?
Oof, don't even get me started.
I know. Why are they Forgotten Worlds? Because we strip mined all of them.
Yeah.
Or blew them up. Otherwise blew them up.
R.I.P. Polis Massa. You will be missed. I want to talk one last thing here. The Center 1 rehab facility that Masameda shows Mon. And this is also a threat, right? This is a place that's it's a geometric shape building. Saw blows it up Kamara's help. So that's kind of why they're there, to show the destruction, but also it's the point to say, hey, this is a re-education facility for those views of the Empire that are deemed antisocial behavior. We correct their minds before we release them back. And Mon's like, so political prisoners? And Moss is like, no, the goal is rehabilitation.
No, he doesn't say no. He says, you're talking about political prisoners? And he responds, the goal is rehabilitation.
Right, yeah, no. Thanks you for him not saying no is important.
It's the,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying no.
No, and he's not saying no. He's saying he's saying what they say in Andor season 1, which is like, we're going to treat the viruses. Spider days.
Yeah.
We're healthcare providers.
We are healthcare providers. Yeah. And we know there are 4 other centers under construction. Center 6 is in design phase. And he does mention that it's mostly organic staff, no more than 12% droids. Which my big brain here is like, is this the beginning of not necessarily one of these facilities, but like the goal of these types of facilities becoming Narkina 5 at some point, right? And the no more than 12% droids, I thought of never more than 12.
Of course, you have to.
And so my mind went there. I'm like, I feel like that's maybe my headcanon is that's an Easter egg to say like this type of program will become a Narkina 5 in the future.
I mean, yeah, just a place with forests and geometric shapes. We know that like
geometric
shape. We know that geometry is all over.
Totally.
All over Andor. Especially in the Empire. Go listen to our Artistry of Andor episode, please.
Heck yeah.
For more conversations on symmetry in geometry. But yeah, this is all just euphemism for we're just going to jail all the people we don't like and put them away and who disagree with us. And the note, there's actually a note that gets like talked about multiple times throughout this book. And this organic stuff, never more than 12% droids, is really interesting and highlights that because I forget if it's Bail or Mon that clocks that like the Empire is very human focused.
Oh yeah.
And they say organic staff. He definitely means organic in the sense of human beings and not other species, like certainly. And it's interesting because we definitely see it by the time that we're in Andor. Like every single person in that ISB meeting room is a human. And most of the people you encounter on Coruscant are humans, with the exception of like the senator, rich people types, but they're not in the Empire.
Yeah. I know exactly what quote you're talking about, by the way. It's when Kemish is with the imperialists, who are the 4040s.
Yeah.
The 4040s philosophy is like, how could the imperial administration favor humans when the Grand Vizier is a Chagrian? Like the right-hand man is an alien. Of course they don't favor humans.
Well, I have some news to break. Is not all marginalized folks are in support of the causes of marginalized folks. Some people choose to cozy up to power, even if that power doesn't include them, because they think it will save them. And it's sad.
It's this is kind of giving like, I can't be ist because I have this type of friend.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, slow your roll there. If you have to say it, you know.
Right.
It's like, we can't be against aliens. We have Masameda in the Senate.
I knew a non-human person once. I knew a guy once.
I know a droid.
And like, we worked on a class.
Hate droids.
We worked on a class project together. We got an A.
Yeah.
Happened one time.
I met an Ithurian one time. I don't hate all Ithurians. I met one.
And he was nice. He was okay.
He was pretty nice. He ran a little place on Tatooine.
Oh, Tatooine.
He was in the Book of Boba Fett. You know, you got a good TV show. I don't know why I'm talking like a Tony Soprano, but you know.
Where are you going with this? But point being, is that, you know, people will choose to participate in power that harms them because, they think that participating in the power will bring them the power when the power is ultimately against their values. And this is everyday sort of people. You don't have to be in the highest echelons of government to do that as well. But yeah, no, it happens a handful of times throughout the book, because that's not actually the particular quote I was thinking about. I think there's one pretty early on in the book.
Okay.
But yeah, we get this quote too. I think it's Mon, where she's like, I've just been noticing more human beings in these imperial spaces. But yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like, it's something that Alexander Freed writes in such a kind of, not a throwaway manner, because literally nothing he ever writes is throwaway, but he writes it in such a casual manner where it's like, oh yeah, here's some extra texture for the galaxy. But of course you need to notice that right away with the Empire, because things change so rapidly, and they also change so visually for people. The uniforms, the chain codes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, as we start to wrap up our conversation on Mon here, just one final quote to leave on her journey. Her fear was her only source of reassurance. Her fear told her that she hadn't yet become numb to atrocity and injustice. So she wrapped her fear around her, clung to it like hope, and watched the city in the night. In the morning, she would let it all go, her fears, her dreams, and her love for the Republic she'd believed in. She would leave it behind, and the galaxy would be different. She would remain unbowed, unyielding, indomitable, a creature of politics and pacifism who had murdered a man and kept secrets from people she had sworn to serve. She would remain a hypocrite, and she would remain committed to her cause, no matter the risk to her body and soul. In the morning, she would remain Senator Mon Mothma of Chandrila. That would have to suffice to save them all, for it was all she had to give. Oh my God. This is like Alexander Freed, like yum, 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 yum.
Yeah.
God damn it. He knows Mon Mothma here. Like this is such a powerful ending to this book. This is the last paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have more to talk about, but like, God damn, this is good.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no additional notes. I feel like we can transition to Bail with another quote.
I love a good quote.
This is one I liked. And I thought was also telling. Mon admired Bail. She called him a friend, and he was. But the man was exhausting at best. At worst, he was insufferable.
Amen.
That's it. And with that, the love of my life, Bail Organa.
Yeah. Bail is so great in this book, and I love his relationship with Mon. We can quickly touch on that here. Like they're definitely at odds. Like she kind of loathes him. He's loved by discontented youth, and she's like, "You're likable. Your policy sucks, but you're likable. Can you help me?" And it says here, both of them had trusted Padme, and to betray her would have been to betray each other. And I think that's ultimately where they get to, is like, we need to put aside our differences and just trust, because Padme trusts.
Yeah,
that's our glue.
I think the interesting thing of like Padme being the glue for like at the center of a coalition and the center of a friendship is really interesting, because Padme was so many things, despite her youth. She was such a leader and so charismatic and so morally focused that it was easy for some people, not all people, of course, but like for some people to follow along with her and build community around her. And so but those bonds are not necessarily, those bonds are strong enough to survive her passing, but not without friction that is maybe unpleasant for both of them at times.
I have to appreciate, by the way, that Padme is not only mentioned by name, but she's such a prominent presence in this book. Like the ghost of Padme is just always looming, right? Like through Leia, through Bail. Leia's a constant reminder, right? And I also think that's like tied into why Bail wants to bring justice to the Jedi's legacy. He thought of Padme Amidala, how horrible her death had been and how young she had seemed even at the end. And then Brea asked him, like, are you doing this for the Jedi or to honor Padme? And he kind of sees that as one and the same, because Padme's burden is that of the Jedi, right? And if like that could get passed down to Leia, and it's Padme's burden, it's Obi-Wan's burden, it's the burden of Anakin, it wasn't right for a child to grow up atoning for the failures of a generation. So he feels like this responsibility that like if he doesn't do this, it will carry with Leia throughout her life.
Right.
Especially knowing that like Padme loved a Jedi. It's all very messy and intertwined here. And Bale's just like not in a good place emotionally throughout this book and mentally.
No, but his cause initially is just because he feels like the galaxy has betrayed one of their own. And not just the Emperor, but everyone has betrayed them by allowing it to happen and being kind of okay with it. And so he's on this quest to like exonerate the Jedi and say what really happened here. And he's not wrong in wanting that, I think. He's just so emotionally charged about why he's really going for it. Because, he had friends in the Jedi beyond, his relationship with Padme and Leia and Anakin. He communicated with Yoda. He clearly knew people in the Jedi. Like, so his quest and his interest, and his desire for something in the here and now that's big and would change things is actually like similar to the desire that Sojin has in killing the Emperor. Like they both want something that's going to kind of be destabilizing. And Mon sees it as we have to work within the confines of what we have in order to not destabilize further. And I think she's right about that in that moment. But also knowing that it means the kind of the destruction not only of Sujin, but of Bale's goals, which are just in what he wants, is sad that there has to be that particular sort of trade-off.
It is a devastating trade-off. And Hockey makes a great point too. He's like she says the most hope change you can hope to create is that you inspire a terrorist movement destined for failure, capable of destroying thousands of lives over the course of decades. I think that says with him a little bit, and in some ways that does become the rebellion, but, right? Like in the eyes of the Empire, they're terrorists, right?
Right.
So,
but I also think that like what she's saying is a little bit more like you're going to inspire a bunch of saws rather than a bunch of Yavin 4s. For lack of a better.
If it starts out as justice for the Jedi, like what ideology does it transform into?
What ideology does it transform into, and what actions are people willing to take in order to speak to that, whatever their message is? And not that those things or the reasons or maybe the things that they do aren't just, but they might be more harmful to more people than helpful. And it's like a really complicated equation. It's a solving one problem that causes another. There's no particularly right answer.
Brea helps nudge him in the right direction too, because I think once he starts whipping votes for the Rebirth Act, he starts to seem more like himself, and Brea reminds him of that and says like, this is how we save Leia, not by running off and grieving and being desperate, ignoring who we are, but by working with people and bringing them together. Don't forget that is what we can do. That's the change. And that's kind of fitting with what Mothma's saying is like, we can't destabilize right now. We are not in a place to destabilize because it will just create further problems. But what we can do is get
set up.
Exactly. Yeah. But what we can do is wrangle some votes, show the Emperor that like we still believe as a Senate in our authority. We don't think you usurp that. And we can show that very publicly. That's the best we can do in this moment with the tools that we have. Like, let's work together and show that like the Senate still believes in its right to exist. And we're not just going to turn over our power like without a fight. Did you like the Rebirth Act kind of speech that Bale gives? Because, Mon's in the hospital and he's got to be the one to deliver that message, which is the most ironic thing of all. Is like she's putting in a lot of the work and then he's coming in at the end to be like, hey, taking credit for the group project here.
I don't actually think he's taking credit for it. I think he's more like of a reluctant face of it.
Yeah.
But like, you're never going to see me be upset about a speech.
He's got that likable Jimmy Schmidt's face. Who in the Senate wouldn't want to vote for a bill with Jimmy Schmidt's face? You know?
You're right. And you should say it louder.
I should say it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, you know, him having to step up for it when that wasn't his original plan and it wasn't particularly his thing, was a powerful move, because I think in that moment specifically he's recognizing what building a coalition really means for his own goals and for the goals of others and how those overlap.
Yeah, and he's also recognizing the strength and unity.
Right.
Because he says in his speech that we have to believe in the empire because it's all we have. Just like the Rebirth Act, it's flawed, it's corrupt, but it can help many people if used properly. If you don't believe in it now, they won't believe in you either. So I think that's a great sales pitch for it, right? And it's sort of the idea that if we try to strive for like the perfect solution rather than work with the tools that we have now, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. And while we spin our wheels, Palpatine takes over more and more of our government. Like, we don't really have that time to afford.
Yeah. But it is tough though, because he also is saying something that he doesn't exactly believe, like believing in the empire. And, you know, the Imperial Rebirth Act will complete the Emperor's institutional reform of our union, guaranteeing that there will be no weakness for enemies to exploit, no hope. Like, he is capitulating to the Emperor, certainly, while this bill is not entirely doing that. But the tough thing is, like, the messaging is what's important, right? And he's speaking towards the Emperor and towards Masameda, etc., Sly Moore, etc., in order to gain that approval for this, you know, maybe slightly sneaky thing to get through. But that messaging also hits the public and becomes, well, I guess everybody's on board for the Empire to some degree. And I don't like that. And that becomes complicated too, because maybe that person feels like maybe some citizens feel particularly betrayed by his words. Why isn't he going harder on the Emperor right now? Yeah, it's a complicated position to be in, but I will never say no to a speech because it goes on for like 3 pages. Amen. You know?
But I also think too, he's appealing to the citizens, because again, the citizens believe in Emperor Palpatine as a unifying force for good. He ended the war. They don't see what happens on the Outer Rims. They don't see, you know, the worlds that are getting enslaved and taken over and mined for resources, right? Like, he makes that plea to say, like, we'll eliminate terrorists who want to destabilize our government. Sounds great to us, says a citizen, because they just saw a bunch of protests.
Right.
And they basically saw like the Star Wars version of the Proud Boys in the 4040s, like try to go to senators' homes and prevent them from voting on this bill to reintegrate separatists, right? But then he also slips in there at the end and says, like, but we also want to make sure the Senate can act without fear of executive authority, right? Like, I'm going to put that in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a balancing act.
Trying to play to all corners for sure.
Yeah.
With the 4040s, is that the scene where like I'm going to say helicopter, but those don't exist in Star Wars, but where they're kind of shooting at citizens or shooting kind of indiscriminately at the citizens to break up this protest?
Yeah, outside of Bale's home, they're just shooting them from a gunship.
Yeah. Just want to put a pin in that, because I remember reading that and going, wow, obviously the Empire is capable of that. And we know the Empire is capable of that in the couple of years before Rogue One, right? Like, we know that the Gorman Massacre is happening. But I found it surprising that the Empire was doing something like that right away with this act. But nobody really spoke up against that particular moment, because in that particular moment, what was happening to those protesters those were people they didn't like. So it wasn't going to bother them. But that's how the Overton window shifts.
Yeah, no, that's mortifying. I hadn't thought about it that way, like how early they're doing this.
Right.
Like,
Well, that's what surprised me right away. Yeah.
yeah. Because in our eyes, it's like, oh, of course they would do that. But it's like, it's been a couple months, right? Like,
Yeah,
or like
not
a
even
year or something.
practically. Yeah.
So
Really, really early on. But I guess the whole impetus of this empire was killing all the Jedi. So
yeah,
maybe I shouldn't
true.
have any sort of surprise about this at all. Sarah, go with the program. The empire is bad, obviously.
Well, but that's another interesting point is like the public perception of the Jedi, and that's Bail's whole mission. Like the public thinks the Jedi tried to truly assassinate Palpatine, and they're like, but
Right.
Palpatine's our guy. He wanted to end the war, and the Jedi wanted to kill him so that they could continue fighting. Probably because they liked it. Like that's the perception. It's wild. It's wild how that window shifts and public perception changes and how it's going to shift in the many years to come. By that point, it's too late because they'll have given so much of their democracy away. And democracy is a fragile thing. You have to have people that actually want to fight for it and uphold it for it to work. Because without that, it can't exist. I love Bail, by the way, asking 3PO to watch the vote count with him in Padme's honor.
Ugh.
Made me happy.
Ugh.
A little golden boy is there. But after the vote, we get Bail back on. I think he's back on Alderaan at this point, and he's in like one of their old wings of the home, and he's at the statue of Jedi Knight Thramus Argent, who is this Jedi that Bail knew as a young kid, and he always looked up to him as like a role model of kind of that calm and centered, dashing, strong, virtuous kind of person. And this is what made Bail always want to reflect the Jedi's finest attributes, as a moon reflects sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I thought that was very nice.
But this is like really that closure moment for Bail to say like, I'm sorry, Jedi, but like I got to fight my own fight. He says, forgive me, friends. Let her, Leia, define her own legacy. Neither of us can carry yours. Jedi might not have attachments, but he did. He hoped those attachments would offer strength enough. And it's a brutal moment. It's a brutal moment, but I think that the point of it is being I can't fix your legacy, but like Leia is here and now, and I care deeply for her and I love her.
Mm-hmm.
But he can actually focus on the here and now, which is probably the most Jedi thing he could do, right? Like don't worry about the past. Here and now is where you belong. Listen to the living force.
And thinking about the living force and what we can do in the here and the now, that brings us to chapter 68. It's not chapter 18. I'll forgive them on this one.
Would have been weird if this happened in chapter 18.
Well, maybe the chapters are really long. I don't know.
True. 100 pages each.
Right, exactly. So we're on chapter 18 on page 1800. Chapter 68. And this is the moment where all roads lead to chapter 68, because we have been getting the stories of Mon and Bail and Saw and Sujin, right, largely independently of one another. And we know that these are three key figures in early rebellion. But how do they really come together? And chapter 68 is the answer to this question. And it is the chapter where we all sit down and we're going to talk about it. And I think that this was definitely the climax of the book. This is the moment that everything is working up to. And I think this is the moment where the next two books are definitely going to jump from, or where we can, as readers, root the next two books in. So where do you think is the starting point for them, or this conversation that they have?
Maybe with Saw, because we haven't talked a lot about Saw. He's sort of the odd man out here in the sense that like they haven't interacted a lot with him throughout the book. Mainly Mon. I mean, Bail is with him for parts of the Dejarit's scenes, but I really liked getting an insight into Saw's philosophies outside of situations where he feels like he's under threat. I mean, he certainly probably feels under threat here from these two who have very different ideas of how to navigate the political scenes. But one thing he immediately said was, I have my own speeches. They don't waste as much time, but they come to the same point. If you stand and watch, things get worse.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is the fundamental difference between Saw and Mon and Bail, and what they will continue to grapple with for their entire I'll call it partnership from now until Rogue One, where it's like he's out there fighting the good fight. He's doing some stuff. He's doing some bad stuff. Sometimes it's at odds with the rebellion, and it makes the rebellion, it puts them in a more compromised position. But at the same time, this is a rebellion who initially does not want to go to Scarif and is like, the odds are too great. You don't want to go. Saw would have gone in a heartbeat, and that's the difference here. You need a Cassian Andor, you need a Jyn Erso to move that needle a bit and to take a risk. And Rogue One is that risk.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, in Andor we get Luthen, who in many ways is a lot like Saw in terms of his willingness to do things that other people are unwilling to do. They both feel a need to push forward, and I think that's what's really clear here. He goes, you are tools of the Emperor. You debate in the Senate while people are dying. You have the habits of people at peace, but there is no peace. You talked about treaties with the Separatists, but the Separatists never wanted a treaty. Now you seek to remove the Emperor through power, through law, but the Emperor doesn't care about law.
Oh, that was such a good, that was a drop the mic. Saw, goddamn.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You can look at all three of these characters, and I think that's the great thing about this book, because I think that Saw as a character is often put in a light. He's like put in a disadvantaged position at times where it's like, oh, he's crazy. Like kind of in Rogue One, he has kind of lost his center to a degree, to where when Bodhi comes in, he's like, Boar gullet. Give him the Boar gullet. I'll see the truth. I
love Boar gullet though.
It's a pretty wild thing to do.
It's so cute.
But he's clearly kind of lost maybe his center over the years in some ways. But he's always been someone who is just willing to take action. And he's saying, I take action. I'm willing to disrupt the status quo, and you are all tools of the status quo, and the status quo is used to harm people. And I think that the wonderful thing about this chapter and just about this book in general is they all get to be right. They all get to be right because he is right. You seek to remove the Emperor's power through law, but the Emperor doesn't care about law. How can you work within the system if he doesn't actually care about the system, if the system is a facade? There's truth in that, certainly. It's a little bit like when they go low, we go high. And I'm not saying that with like a terrible context, because there's like good connotations to that. There's also negative connotations to that, of like occasionally you do have to stoop to the level of somebody else in order to be eye to eye with them and find an answer to your problem. And like, I think it's a complicated issue because they're both right. They're all right in different ways. There are moments where each of them is more right than the other.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is what you said about Saw's view and just how people see him as like kind of that outlandish, out there kind of guy. But he is sort of you have to think of him as sort of like a teeter-totter, where it's like Bale on one side, Mon on the other, and he's like the center triangle. He keeps them kind of moving back and forth a little bit, right? Like he keeps them dynamic. Right. Without him, it's just a flat rectangle, sitting on the ground doing nothing. So as much as they don't like him disrupting their plans, he kind of needs to, in some ways. Like he's got to be a disruptor. You need a disruptor who's going to keep things interesting. And if they're not going to take that risk, somebody has to, right?
Right. Like, okay, not to bring it all the way back to Andor, but Andor season 1, Aldhani causes a lot of problems for a lot of people, but it's also the thing that radicalizes Marva.
Right.
And other people. So
there's a lot of other Marvas out there.
Right. And that action caused a ripple effect that led to more action, led to people standing up when they otherwise didn't. And so, yeah, it's you sometimes need more than the flat surface.
Yeah. I also like your point that Luthen and Saw are pretty similar in some ways, being disruptors. And it, now thinking of Rogue One, it makes total sense that, of course, the two people, Cassian and Jyn, who were the closest in those two's vicinity for so long, Luthen and Saw, Of course, they kind of carry that spirit forward a little bit into Rogue One. Like Cassian's got a lot of Luthen in him by this point. Jyn probably has some Saw in her as well, right? Like, I'm a rebel, I rebel. Because she was raised by Saw without a father, right? And for the most part, for many, many years, as much as she might resent him at some points, but she also appreciates him.
She definitely resents him at times and rejects him at times, but at the end of the day, like, she is shaped by him in many ways. Certainly. Yeah.
Naturally, those are the two people that are going to be like, nope, we're going the Scarif. F it. We're doing it.
Yeah. Like, this is what we've got to do. Yeah.
Talking through some of Mon's and Bale's responses here. So starting with Mon, I mentioned a quote earlier. I'll hit it again here. The Emperor is a threat to democracy. Opposing him is also anti-democratic, right? So again, that public perception that he is the good guy. He stopped the war. People want anything but war. So opposing him is actually, in some ways, indicating we want to throw the galaxy back into war. We want to get rid of the guy that stopped it. So like, people are not going to vibe with that naturally. But I love this one quote here. Any victory that required accepting the lies the Empire was built upon was no victory at all. I thought this is a great one because, you know, I think nowadays, like, there's just so much lying. There's just so much lying. It's just wild to me how much people can lie, blatantly lie, how they can erode truth. And that's just normal. That's just become normal. You know, it's really alarming.
They'd maybe be really good at fiction writers if they can just, you know, make stuff up on the page instead of making stuff up in real people's lives, you know?
Yeah.
Just pondering it.
I think Mon is making like one of the most important points here, right? And the lie that the Empire was built upon is, one, the Jedi were traitors and the genocide was justified.
Mm-hmm.
The second being, I'm bringing you peace. Peace is a lie. And the third being Palpatine sitting up there on the dais going, I love democracy.
I love democracy. Right? Yeah.
Forget 2 truths and a lie. It's 3 lies, baby. It's 3 right there. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, it's 2 truths and a lie, but it's actually 3 lies, but he's telling you it's 3 truths.
There's a lot of mental gymnastics there, but we got there.
That's what it's all about. And the propaganda is all about mental gymnastics.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is kind of speaking to propaganda, misinformation, confirmation bias, right? Like, we as a society, and I'm just speaking real world at this point, there's just so much misinformation and the ability to just lie and the ability for media and journalists to not hold those lies accountable because they want to be good journalists and remain objective, right?
Objective in quotes.
Alleged lie, like, you know, so and so says this allegedly, or like somebody did this alleged salute. You know, it's like, no, that is a salute. That's a Nazi salute, right? Like, that's the truth. Stop pretending it's not.
It's the Jubilee media of it all, which gives both sides to a conversation, both like polar opposites to a conversation, equal weight when they don't have equal merit. It's like giving 4 seats to climate change deniers, you know, on your panel of 8, when the vast body of scientific research around this topic says climate change is happening right now and it's obviously real and humans are obviously the problem. And it's like, you're going to give 50% of the seats to the opposing side when they don't have the opposing sort of weight in the conversation. Anyway.
Yeah. And it becomes so difficult.
That's the problem.
It's like, how do you call something an opposing side when it's just anti-truth? It's objectively not true, right? And the more you give voice to that over time, the easier it is for society to accept those lies.
The Overton window shifting.
Super frustrating. I read that line though from Mon and I was like, God damn it, she's right. And I'm so sick and tired of it.
The other piece of this puzzle is Bale in this conversation. And he, I think, also has something really interesting to say about who they will become, or who they could become. He says, it's too early to say. What we are, a political or social or military cause, may depend on which of us sees success. The others will fall in line or fade away. And I just think it's really interesting as we are getting closer to the time of Rogue One with Andor. Like, we know that to a degree Saw falls away, that he doesn't see success, and that the alliance led by Bail and Mon and on Yavin 4 and other places or whatever, like that's where they're going to see success. And so they become a sort of military cause and a political cause and a social cause, but not in the same way that if Saw was leading it, they would be. And so I think that that's curious and an insightful point.
Yeah, and I also love Bale mentioning, just the reality is they need more allies, people with resources, committed to the cause, willing to risk themselves without payment or hesitation, right? Like it's going to take time.
Right.
It's going to take a lot of time. And this last bit here, you can't fight evil with compromise, which I feel like is just so important because we keep seeing a lot, like how much we're willing to accept there is a piece of the other side that we're willing to compromise with when that other side is so objectively untrue and hateful and awful and evil, right? You're trying to compromise with people who believe that certain individuals shouldn't have basic human rights. How do you logically compromise with somebody who holds those beliefs? Or how do you compromise on a bill that gives credibility or gives some ground to those types of beliefs, right? Like you can't compromise a bill and say like, yeah, well, we'll do this, but we're going to take all these rights away from people. That's not compromise. That's just letting evil win, And so that's why I think Bale's saying like, you can't fight evil with compromise because like by compromising, you've let evil win at that point and there is no battle to be fought afterwards.
I think also this idea of like compromise, like you can't compromise with evil is like evil is running a marathon and you're walking to catch up to them, but you're still running the marathon. And I think that's like, I also think that's like the moral issue they find themselves in is like Saw's the one that's truly refusing to compromise truly refusing to compromise. He's the one that's like, I'm going to take action. I don't care. This is how we win. Whereas like these other two have to work within a system where they have to compromise in the here and now. They have to compromise themselves in the here and now and their morals in order to kind of build something where they ultimately don't have to compromise in the future in order to defeat the evil.
Yeah. And to wrap up here, Mon's kind of reflecting on what each of their roles are going to be. They kind of walk away after hours of this, right? That they didn't really make any ground. They kind of recognize each person's point of view and that's it, right? But Mon says that, she would compromise and walk away tainted and she would change lives. Not many, maybe in the least efficient way imaginable. Whether or not she believed in the art of politics, it was still the art she loved. Saw would fight the unwinnable battles, become a hero, and inspire followers who would throw themselves against the Emperor's army of death. Think Jyn Erso. And Bale would keep the flame of purity alive to remind them and the galaxy of what another way could look like. And I think that's like the best summation of these three characters. I like Maud acknowledging that, like, yes, Saw has a certain way of doing things, but he will become a hero and a martyr ultimately, right? And he's going to win those unwinnable battles. And like, that's the role he will play. Bale is like the moral compass for both of us, right? Like Mon's compromising and kind of being a tool of the Empire by working within it. But Bale kind of keeps her, I think, we'll continue to keep her in check a little bit, right? And like to remind her of who she is in the moments that she needs to be reminded. And also help point out her strengths when maybe she doesn't see them, or maybe when she is just too in her head a little bit, So I don't know. I'm excited to see like how the three of these characters like continue to interact in these next two books. And I know Saw says like never contact me unless the galaxy's at stake. So like I do wonder, do we see them contact each other in the next two books, or are we literally talking like not for a very long time?
Yeah. Yeah. This is setting up it's setting up boundaries again. But we have 2 more books for them to break their own boundaries,
Yeah.
or for them to kind of interact with each other in various ways. So I'll be really curious to see where we head and how far ahead we head in the next book, because we know that this series is going to cover a lot of time.
Right.
Which is also so curious because now we're just getting pieces in different parts of our Rots to A New Hope puzzle. And now they're kind of in different corner, or they're like a part of the same section of the photo. Maybe they have the same color way, you know, but they're not next to each other, which means there's room for more story. If you ask me, in this essay, I will ask Star Wars to write 18 more stories in this era. Thank you. At least 18, 19 if they're feeling really generous.
Well, speaking of the future, next book by Rebecca Roanhorse, spring 2026. We got a little bit of a ways to go. We don't know what the title is. We also don't know any cover art. I will take a guess and think we will get a title, official title at Star Wars Celebration next week.
You think?
I think so.
I don't think so.
I think they're coming in with the big guns.
So
Yeah.
I'm good at losing bets, but I don't think so.
No cover. That's way too early. But I think they'll maybe announce a title. Just on the the Andor hype train. Hey, we got the first book. Just a little sneak peek. Here's the title of the second book. We don't know what the title of the third book is, though.
I think that could come out at New York Comic Con. Thank you.
I mean, I would love that because I'll be there too. So we'll definitely get a cover reveal at New York Comic Con.
Because New York Comic Con would be like 6 months out as opposed to like a year out.
Maybe I'm being a little hopeful, but we'll see. You might win the bet on this one. But
watch it be like it's all about Dalna on like a random Tuesday.
Listener, if you know. Yeah.
Sarah loses bets a lot faster than she expects to is the answer to that.
One other thing you should know, listener, if you're a friend here, is that we do our odds and ends at the end of every episode. And that's just the things that we didn't get to, we want to quickly mention. So Sarah, kick us off.
We could be here for another 2 hours to talk about all the other things in this book, but that's why we have an odds and ends section to kind of go through it a little bit quicker. Because we talked about our basically Mon and Bail this whole time, but there's also like the Sujin Saw and like the Partisan era storyline. And then there's Haki, Chemish, Zuna, the 4040s. In that storyline, there's so much happening in this book, and we can't get to it all. We're just two folks who, if we could podcast for 6 hours, we probably would, but we are EP people who have day jobs. This is such an unfortunate position to be in, but unfortunately, we do live in a capitalistic society. If anybody would like to be a benefactor for our work and allow us to go full time, and that would let us podcast for 6 hours, hit us up. Our email is on our website, so
pay us and we'll do it, please.
right. Anyway, so with no income allowing us to podcast for 6 hours, we have our odds and ends. That's me spamming on the odds and ends. Brad, do you want to start with an odd or an end?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of income, let's talk about the price of peace.
Hot. That was a good transition. That was solid. That was a really good transition.
I worked on that all night. There's a quote here: "The end of the war was a miracle, but the price of peace was growing. They had been an empire for less than a month. How long would they be tallying the cost?" And I just love this idea of the cost of peace. Again, like right now, peace is a lie. Eventually we'll get to peace, but like, what was the cost of getting there? And I think of Alexander Freed's other book, Victory's Price. We finally got to victory. What is the price of it? So it was a little fun Easter egg, one of our favorite books. So that's all.
I would like to do that thing that I always do, which is talk about random places like the new Nemoidia Hotel or the Museum of Contemporary Music, which was closed until further notice because we cannot have museums saying things that we don't want them to say. It's very anti-empire. Anyway, I just love some places. I would also like to highlight the University of Cato Nemoidia, where Center 6 is in design, the design phase, shepherded by an engineer of Cato Nemoidia. And they can triple the number of those if they need to, is what Masameda is saying. So I just want to add, we've got the Institute of Quantitative Studies at Bothawui. We've got all our various institutions of higher learning. We have the University of Cato Nemoidia. Now, I wonder, they have a design phase or like an, architectural. What is their archaeology and history programs like? Because we know about the vault on Cato Nemoidia that has, of course, the most important thing in the entire galaxy, the Kaiser device.
She did it. She did it. She somehow fit it in. I can't believe we got here, but she did it. Incredible work.
I got
2 hours and 30 minutes in, she did it.
That's right. The Kaiser device, which is an ancient device, it's spherical in nature that had to be activated by one light side user and one dark side user. What does it do? I don't know. I'm obsessed with it though.
Please bring it back. Please
bring it back for me. So yeah, I'm just thinking about, and on that note, these are all my nods and ends. They're just the silly little things in the corners. Mon Mothma, historian. Mon Mothma, want to be historian. Mon Mothma, love you.
We all love Mon Mothma.
That really tickled my heart. I was like, I'm so delighted by that. Anyway.
So I have the destruction of the Siege of Coruscant. I think this book really emphasized like how vast the impact of that was, like tens of millions of people dead, displaced without homes. And I just, obviously the movie Revenge of the Sith doesn't have time to uncover that a little bit, but it sat with me for a minute here to think about that. So there's that. There's also Ao Dejuritz, which we didn't talk a lot about, but it's a big centerpiece of this book with Bail and Saw and Sojin and Haki kind of all coming together. Again, this planet that used to house trillions of people, the oceans, atmosphere changed over time, lower levels got submerged, and it's kind of like this place where there's a lot of structures that people can't land on because they're so at risk of being destroyed. And we see that happen in this book when the bomb goes off from Haki, and they kind of lead to the total and complete destruction of this place, which is just devastating, right? And it says the unimaginably ancient structures bore no telltale scars. It represented the hope of a natural death when so many civilizations came to more gruesome ends. Just makes you think of all the civilizations that the Empire will also do the same to, Jeddah. Places mentioned in Catalyst that I can't remember. I think there's one in there somewhere.
This is the reread Catalyst. We should really reread Catalyst anyway.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention other little random things like I'm going to say it wrong, but like the Bentrinus Act, which you can't rent, which if you can violate that act by renting like public or political spaces for your private events. So, you don't want to be in violation of that.
Definitely not.
But also, we're talking about, I think some of the 40-40. Yeah, some of the 40-40s. And Folitz was a shuttle pilot by trade and a clue horn player by avocation. I just really like that this, guy, he's making a movement and they're just playing the clue horn just for fun. And the 40-40s had taken to attending his band performances. That's nice.
I love that. Little Alexander Freed music nugget there for you.
See, it's just a little nugget. I just love a little nugget. Alexander Freed is so good at giving me just like little nuggets of Star Wars texture. And I'm like, yes, it's so interesting. The clue horn player is playing with his band in the clubs and his political buddies are coming to hang out.
Alexander Freed just does such a good job of making the Star Wars galaxy feel bigger. And I appreciate that.
Every time.
Yeah.
It's I think it's his greatest gift. Not that other writers aren't also making the world bigger, but he has such a particular way of not wasting a single word in the book and really using every word to enrich the galaxy. And it's like really impressive.
Yeah.
Every time.
Super minute details, which is appropriate for him writing this book because I feel the same way when I watch Andor. Sometimes I point to something on screen and I go, oh, that's an Alexander Freed
nugget.
thing.
That's like an Alexander Freed level nugget. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. I have
honestly, whenever we're in Luthen's, like,
yeah,
that's a crazy nugget.
That could be from the University of Cato Nemoidia.
For real, okay.
I have two more. One of them is Cois Runt gets a mention. Fifth Sage of the Dwarti, one of the founders of the modern Republic. And they issued 3 responsibilities, which were to speak to your constituents, have a responsibility to one's own conscience and only be a proxy for the will of the people. And the third thing being a responsibility to democracy itself. And I kind of saw this as like Star Wars's and / the Republic's version of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I just thought that was, and that's obviously very like American centric of me to say from our Declaration of Independence. But I don't know. I kind of like that like small 3 core pillar idea for the Republic and the 5th Sage. Like what?
Yeah.
Alexander, what?
Right.
Tell me more.
What are you saying? In that same note, political historian Baruth Grigorab had likened the difference between a planetary government and the Galactic Senate to that between the rural community and a metropolis. Quote, when a person depends upon their neighbor for assistance during the harvest, when strangers are few and the familial ties bind the farmer to the freighter captain, the greatest danger is shunning or exile. Mollifying your peers becomes a matter of survival. You have an incentive to iron out differences, or if necessary, to bury any radical beliefs that would put you at odds with your community. In a city of millions, however, a person may build a tailor-made community inside a larger organism. Anger your neighbor and you may move in with a friend. Become an outcast among your coworkers and you may take a job with your competitor. Diverse arts and philosophies may flourish without the flattening effect of a more tight-knit community, and differences might be celebrated. Yet, a lack of common ties that can also cause neighbors to see each other as rivals. Ideological opponents can be dismissed without the need for engagement, and good people may slip through the cracks, lost in the chaos and written off as someone else's problem. Okay, Mr. Political Historian Baruth Grigorab. Where's your paper?
We do love a good historian. Comac Vitas and Baruthi, whatever his name is, should talk and meet and have a conversation about the Nameless. I agree. I agree with that completely and wholeheartedly. I guess maybe our last one here, unless you have any other ones. I thought this was a great one to end on because we both respect and agree with the sentiment. They're going through the Rebirth Act vote, and Senator Spieg asks Ludd if he's sleeping with Mon Mothma, probably on the rumor. Mon Mothma started in the ISB, shows how quickly things get around, and Spieg tells Ludd, "It's a hell of a reason to throw everything away, Ludd. Hell of a reason." And honestly, we're just going to end it there. Facts. Who wouldn't throw it all away for Mon Mothma? I certainly would. Sarah, would you?
I mean, if the opportunity presented itself to throw everything away from Mon Mothma.
Oh my gosh. What a doozy. 2.5 hours. We're only 30 minutes over what we thought we would go. Pretty incredible stuff.
Which is
right on schedule.
Better than we could have done, considering like we could have talked for we had more notes than our pages or than our conversation allowed.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, that's it. That's it. Are talking Andor all month long. Next week,
that's right.
Artistry of Andor. Week after, season 2 preview. And then every week after, we got 3 episodes of Andor
1 through 3
at a time. 1 through 3. 4 through 6.
7 through 9.
10, 11, 12.
Done. Yeah. It's over.
Done.
And then we're going back to the High Republic, so don't be too sad.
Yeah.
And then the High Republic ends, and then we're all going to be sad.
But
then we have this September, so we're going to bring it back. We're going to bring it back.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned it.
Probably. Well, now we have to maybe do Sith October for the Rotz novelization. Our whole plan might be all messed up now.
Oh gosh.
Del Rey, change the date, please.
Oh,
to September.
They mucked up the alliteration. That's devastating.
Really devastating.
Anyway, we'll have a meeting later and we'll figure it out.
Yes.
We'll iron it all out.
True. But what wouldn't be devastating is if you followed us on all of our socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast feeds. You get all those Andor April episodes, baby. Andor. 5 weeks. 5 weeks of Andor, plus 3 more weeks of Andor after that. So 8 weeks.
See, that's why I'm
Andor.
That's why I'm saying September can go into October. That's my thought.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So as we prepare for Andor, season 2, make sure you're staying hydrated. What else can you do to prepare? Let me think. Buy a box of tissues.
Eat a little treat.
Have a little spa day. I mean, we need to just like prepare for the emotional devastation, but also be in the mindset to accept the story of Andor into our hearts. because it's going to be good, but also probably painful. So knowing how much I cried at the end of Rogue One, it's inevitable. So please stay well, prepare for Andor. Please take your allergy meds if the trees are starting to get, leaves and pollen is starting to be in the air, because you don't want to be sneezing on top of being sad or preparing for Andor. Preparing for Andor. Anyway, we have a Patreon where all of our Andor Again episodes are. Those are our recaps of season 1, but in 2025. So yeah, we've been having fun rewatching Andor season 1 and getting ready for season 2. So thank you to all of our patrons to help make that happen, and can go listen to those episodes right now. They are Abigail, Amy, Andy, Ben, Brian, Cheryl, Clay, David, Emma, Jennifer, Josephine, Jules, Katie, Knights of Ren, Krista, Ian, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Skytalker, Soulcatcher, Travis, and V-Glyph. Thank you so much all for your support. And thank you to everybody who takes the time out of their day to listen to this old podcast. We're so grateful you're here. Thanks for being part of our community. Thanks for letting our voices into your day. It means a lot. So I hope that you're having a good one and taking care of yourself. And we will see you in the next episode.
Absolutely. Thank you all once again. And until next time, may the force be with you always.